Thank you, Mr. Speaker. September is Suicide Prevention Month, a time for our nation to raise awareness about the persistent scourge of suicide. Tens of thousands of Americans die each year purposefully by their own actions. They are neighbors and our friends. They are our sons and our daughters. And too often, they are the men and women who have served our country honorably in the United States military. An estimated 22 veterans commit suicide every day in our country. That's one life lost every 65 minutes. We've assembled today's special order to accomplish three things. First, we seek to demonstrate our continuing support for the individuals, organizations, and agencies whose efforts in addressing this preventable epidemic continue in the face of difficulty. Second, we are here to challenge the VA, the Department of Defense, and our fellow lawmakers to do more. The number of veteran deaths by suicide is increasing despite current efforts. Clearly, what we are doing now isn't working. We are failing in our obligation to do right by those who have served so honorably. And finally, we send a message to military families who have experienced this tragedy. To grieving families across America, know that your family's loss isn't forgotten. We are working to stop this epidemic and prevent future suicides. We work for the memory of your loved ones and for the prevention of future losses. My colleagues here today believe, as I believe, that no one who comes home after serving our country should ever feel they have nowhere to turn. Sadly, many of our young vets feel just that. Earlier this year, a young veteran in my district committed suicide. Daniel Summers was an Army veteran of 2 tours in Iraq. He served on Task Force Lightning, an intelligence unit. He ran over 400 combat missions as a machine gunner in the turret of a Humvee. Part of his role required him to interrogate dozens of terrorist suspects, and his work was deemed classified. Like many veterans, Daniel was haunted by the war when he returned. He suffered from flashbacks, nightmares, depression, and additional symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, made worse by a traumatic brain injury. Daniel needed help. He and his family asked for help the best way they knew how. Unfortunately, the VA enrolled Daniel in group therapy sessions instead of connecting him with a private counselor or therapist where he would be able to talk confidentially about his experiences. He attended the VA group sessions even though he knew, due to the classified nature of his work, that he could not fully share what gave him nightmares. Like many, Daniel's isolation got worse when he transitioned home to civilian life. He tried to provide for his family, but he was unable to work due to his disability. Daniel struggled with the VA bureaucracy. His disability appeal had been pending for over 2 years in the system without any resolution. Daniel didn't get the help he needed in time. On June 10th of 2013, Daniel wrote a letter to his family. It begins, "I am sorry that it has come to this. The fact is, for as long as I can remember, my motivation for getting up each day has been so that you would not have to bury me. As things have continued to get worse, it has become clear that this alone is not a sufficient reason to carry on. The fact is, I am not getting better, I am not going to get better, and I will most certainly deteriorate further as time goes on. From a logical standpoint, it is better to simply end things quickly and let any repercussions from that play out in the short term, rather than drag things out into the long term." He goes on to say, "I am left with basically nothing. Too trapped in a war to be at peace, too damaged to be at war, abandoned by those who would take the easy route, and a liability to those who stick it out and thus deserve better. So you see, not only am I better off dead, but the world is better without me in it. This is what brought me to my actual final mission." Daniel's parents, Howard and Jean, were devastated. But in the midst of their pain, they bravely shared Daniel's story and created a mission of their own. Their mission is to ensure that Daniel's story brings light to America's deadliest war, the 22 veterans that we lose every day to suicide. I am grateful to Howard and Jean for their courage and their strength. But we cannot leave this great task to Howard and Jean alone. The rest of the country must stand and join Howard and Jean in their work to prevent suicide. Each of us can do something to raise awareness, to be that light for a struggling veteran in our community. Businesses can display signs like this one to let veterans know that help is always available. Mental health professionals can volunteer with organizations like Give an Hour to provide free counseling to veterans and their families. And we can all learn to recognize the signs of crisis by visiting veteranscrisisline.net and then reaching out to the vets in our lives. Here in Congress, we too can do more. We need a VA that provides real and meaningful help to veterans in need. We who enjoy freedom every day, thanks to the sacrifices of our military service members, we must all step up to end the epidemic of veteran suicide. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And now I yield to the gentleman from Michigan, Congressman Dan Benishek.
Thank you. I want to thank my colleague from Arizona for doing this special order today. This is an issue that's very close to me as well, and I want to join the rest of my colleagues here today and recognize September as the Veteran Suicide Prevention Month. As my colleague mentioned, a veteran in this country commits suicide every 65 minutes. That's 22 lives extinguished every day. As the father of a veteran, as a doctor that's worked at the VA hospital in northern Michigan for over 20 years, and as the chairman of the Health Subcommittee on Veteran Affairs, I know that the challenges of military life do not end once our service members retire from active duty. The mental wounds of war may be invisible, but no less real to the young men and women suffering from them. Facing high unemployment rates, the stigma of post-traumatic stress disorder, and the loss of military fellowship, returning veterans often face a crisis of confidence at the very moment they should feel nothing but relief and rest. This year we will bring 34,000 troops home from Afghanistan. The President has indicated he may withdraw all of the 63,000 members strong force by the end of 2014. The time to act to address this epidemic of veteran suicide is now. I am pleased that the VA leadership has made veteran suicide a priority. New programs putting research to work on reviewing health records for suicide risk factors is one example of the important steps that are being taken. But more, much more, needs to be done. We cannot and we will not allow 22 suicides a day to become the new normal. As friends and families of our veterans and those serving our country, there are some things we all can do. We can work to recognize the symptoms that could indicate serious problems and identify where and how to get assistance when we need it. To all veterans who are struggling to whether to take their own life, know that there is no shame in asking for help. You are not broken, and God has not forgotten you. You volunteered to go to war for us, and we have failed to provide you adequate support when you returned home. That is changing, and I beg you to reach out to your local VA, Veterans Center, Veteran Service Organizations, or local member of Congress for help. Together, we can begin to turn the tide on veteran suicide. Everyone can help fight this epidemic and be there for those that were there for us. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'll yield back.
Thank you, Congressman Benishek. I appreciate your words very much. Our next speaker who will join us this afternoon is my colleague from Florida, Congressman Patrick Murphy. I yield to him.
First of all, I'd like to thank the gentlelady from Arizona for bringing us all together for this very important issue. And I stand in support of my colleagues that are here today to support our brave men and women of the United States military who are willing to give life and limb in service of our great nation. Those who fought for our freedom have earned America's gratitude and support, as they re-enter society after the trauma of serving in prolonged war zones. Our nation must remain focused on the health and well-being of the brave men and women who have served. This means treating even the wounds that are not visible. September is Suicide Prevention Month, and it is incumbent that every one of us takes the time to reach out to service members and veterans that may be struggling. It should shake every member of this body to know that we lose 22 heroes every day to suicide. Yesterday, I was honored to join with local veteran groups to bring attention to this troubling issue. I want to take this opportunity to thank Mary Hinton with the Renewal Coalition, Dr. Deepak Mandy with the West Palm Beach VA Medical Center, and Dr. Raul Diaz with the Jupiter Veteran Center for not only joining me at this important event yesterday, but for the important work they are doing to assist the veterans and their families in our community every day. I also want to recognize the great work of the Veterans Crisis Line, which has fielded over 890,000 calls since 2007 and provides important, comprehensive mental health care at VA medical centers across the nation. I also want to thank Lynn Zimoniak for her hard work and dedication with Angel Fire, another organization in my district which helps our wounded veterans transition back to civilian life. For Suicide Prevention Month, let's recommit ourselves to providing our heroes who have sacrificed so much for our nation with the respect, the benefits, and the care that they have earned through their service by raising awareness, ending the stigma, and treating their invisible wounds. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. I will now yield to another colleague from the great state of Florida, Mr. Ted Yoho.
I thank my colleague from Arizona for putting this together. New Mexico, I'm sorry. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to speak about the epidemic of veterans who not only commit but consider suicide. And again, I want to quote what my colleague talked about, the quote of "too trapped in war to be at peace, too damaged to be at war." And these are the words left behind by that soldier, Daniel, who tragically took his own life a few months ago. And Daniel is one of many who are affected by PTSD and who come back from war with suicidal thoughts. This is an epidemic among our servicemen and women, and it must be stopped. And it's estimated that, again, more than 22 veterans take their life each day. And that's 30% of all veterans have considered suicide. And in Florida's 3rd Congressional District alone, there are over 120,000 veterans, which according to current data means that's about 36,000 veterans in my district that have thought about suicide. And this is unacceptable, and we must remedy this. We need to do all we can for those that have sacrificed the most for our nation, and that just cannot extend to the battlefield. We must continue to take care of our soldiers when they come back home. That includes setting up programs to help veterans deal with PTSD and other psychological issues and get that proper help that they need. We have to make veteran suicide prevention a priority, and I, along with my colleagues, will work tirelessly towards that end. George Washington said, "To judge a nation's future military force and loyalty to that nation's military will be determined on how well that nation takes care of their veterans." And before our nation engages in another war, I hope we look at the true cost of that war. If we look at the cost of the wars in Afghanistan, in Iraq, it's not just the trillions of dollars or the thousands of lives that have been lost, but the true cost of that war will be felt by this nation for the next 60, 70, 80 years. And we need to make sure that we take care of those veterans, and we think long and hard before we ever do that again. Mr. Speaker, I yield back, and I thank my colleagues.
Thank you, Mr. Yoho. Next, I'd like to yield time to the distinguished Congresswoman from Illinois, a proud veteran herself, Representative Tammy Duckworth.
I thank the gentle lady from Arizona for pulling us together on this incredibly important issue. Our veterans, throughout their military career, are taught to be physically tough and mentally strong. And just because they suffer from post-traumatic stress does not negate that. They deserve every opportunity to achieve the same American dream that they defended for the rest of us. Yet, unfortunately, too many of our veterans suffer from post-traumatic stress or other mental injuries resulting from their service. Post-traumatic stress and mental injuries are not always the result of combat, but can also include such trauma as that of sexual assault. Regardless of how the trauma is suffered, we still must take care of our veterans. We cannot allow these injuries to prevent them from living the lives that they deserve. And in some cases, these injuries have led these brave men and women to taking their own lives. It's been almost 8 years since my own injury, and in that time, if the 22 suicides a day rate were counted, there have been at least 24,000 veteran suicides. This is simply unacceptable. When I was director of the Illinois Department of Veterans Affairs, one of the very first things that I did was to create a 24/7 hotline for mental health available for vets. We have one now across the nation, and that telephone number is 1-888-273-TALK. 888-273-TALK. Please put that on your refrigerator doors. You never know when that number could save a life. You know, we started that hotline because caring for our veterans and their mental well-being is not a secondary priority. It is a mission that we must pursue each and every day. We cannot rest until we end veteran suicide in our nation. We need to care for these warriors' invisible wounds with as much dedication and as much resources as we do their other combat injuries. Yet, because they are invisible, we often overlook these wounds. I am asking all levels of government, business, and ordinary citizens to make preventing veteran suicide our mission. We must come together and reduce the stigma of post-traumatic stress. We must provide the funding and the support that our heroes need. They fought for us. Now it is time for us to fight for them. I yield back.
Thank you, Representative Duckworth. I'll now yield to another fine colleague from the great state of Illinois, Representative Rodney Davis.
Thank you to the gentlelady from Arizona for putting this special order together. It is a true privilege to stand here to highlight an issue that needs to be dealt with here in America. Our veterans are those who have protected our freedoms that allow us to stand on this floor and debate the issues of the day. Without their sacrifices, we wouldn't have the America that we know today. I'm surprised when I read the statistics about veteran suicide. The number who die by their own hands each year is greater than the official number of all U.S. war deaths in more than a decade of fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan. Between 2005 and 2011, over 49,000 veterans have taken their lives, and more than 69% of all veteran suicides were among those 50 and older. And nearly 1 in 5 suicides nationally is a veteran, even though veterans only make up 10% of the U.S. population. We need to take steps to ensure that our veterans have the mental health resources they need. We need to make sure that we raise awareness and do away with the stigma of suicide so that veterans feel comfortable finally reaching out for help. And when soldiers are scared to come forward about their mental health problems because they think they will be labeled a coward, they continue down a dark and lonely path that eventually could lead to suicide. Instead, we need to ask our struggling veterans to ask for help. As my colleague from Illinois just mentioned, the Department of Veterans Affairs launched a crisis line that since 2007 has answered more than 890,000 calls and has made over 30,000 rescues. In 2009, they added a chat line for texts, and over 108,000 texts have been sent. These are the types of resources that we need to provide those who have provided so much protection and freedom for us here in America. And I stand here today to work with my colleagues across the aisle to make things happen. Thank you again to the gentlelady from Arizona, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Davis.